Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Learn with @aviboy 2006.
Okay, hello everyone. I think today we'll learn about AWS RDS. So we'll learn like what is the AWS RDS, what are the benefit of using RDS, how the RDS, the multi-agent work, single-agent work, what is the failure mechanism is there, and we'll have a walkthrough on RDS setup. Like when we are doing RDS, what are the things need to be considered while doing it, which cannot cost you more, or we can have a control on the scaling part also. Okay, so let's me start with the understand what is the AWS RDS. Okay, RDS is actually mean for relational database systems. Okay, I think many of you are aware about the relational database system, right? So where we have store the data tables, we have records and field, like a similar like you guys have already heard about MySQL, Oracle, or our I think PostgreSQL also generally. Okay, so it is offered by the AWS, that is why called the AWS RDS, and it is a managed service for all the type of the SQL queries or query language supported by the other provider like MariaDB, PostgreSQL, and MySQL, Microsoft SQL servers also. Also, AWS has their own products also that is called the Aurora. Okay, and that is the AWS property services. Okay, similar like the MySQL and Workbase also, like MySQL owned by another company like MySQL one, similar like the Aurora is owned by the AWS services. AWS RDS handles the routine database like task scheduling, okay, provisioning of the storage, whenever there is upscaling happening or downscaling happening, manage the properly thing, patching work, like to upgrade to particular, uh, clear up that thing, backing of your database daily basis or even schedule time basis, recovery, failure mechanism, everything by the RDS generally. Okay, along with that, RDS supports another good benefit that is called a multi-agent deployment options. We'll have a walkthrough on that part, how multi-agent work on a later slide. But on a high level, like you can run some of the critical workload with the high availability zone and build an automated failure mechanism as a primary database and secondary database to synchronize it automatically. Okay, so this is like a very basics understanding about the AWS RDS. So, okay, this is about the RDS understanding. Is I'll move to the next slide. So these are the benefit of RDS. Right? So before I start up, like I will just have a look into like in initial day, right? We used to set up the server, maybe the on premises or maybe on cloud also. When the cloud also come in the picture that time, you can consider whenever the cPanel was there earlier days was okay. We used to a database in the same server only, where the code also reside in the same server and the RDS also reside, like database also reside on the same server. So what was the problem and flaw in that system, and why we go for the cloud-based database system, such as the AWS RDS, right? So because the one part is easy to use. How easy to use? Because it has the database host connectivity, which has a managing the part where you can add the rules for the like who can give access or which IP to allow the things also, and it has a proper control panel, okay, to manage the part. That is why it's easy to. I think you when you are walk through on a demo, you will get to know how it easy to create a RDS also. The second part was the performance. Okay, why it was a performance side in a like older mechanism, it was under the same EC2 machine or maybe same cloud server machine. So if that machine got need some enhancement, right, it is a scaling with the similar machine mechanism only. But sometime what happened, machine like server, I cannot say machine, it's like server, if it demanding the high, okay, it can scale it, but RDS or maybe database has to be scaled on a same time. Okay, so to avoid that things, suppose consider the server has a different demand and database has a different demand. How do we manage that if both are on a similar server? Okay, to avoid that, it's kept a separate that part database, and it has extra scalability, extra performance management system, and plus the other facilities. Okay, along with that, like a multi-agent one, that's one of the features we are going to talk later. Okay, this is a way of actually a performance enhancing. And as I mentioned, it's scalable because it has the auto scaling option like we saw for EC2 machine or other things, right? Serverless architecture also. So auto scaling also is there. So whenever demand is high, it can go vertical also, it can go the horizontal scaling also. Okay. Second part is availability. It available all the time. It has a mechanism of failure mechanism to manage that. If particular instance is up, it can immediately sorry, if particular instance is down, it can immediately up the other instances also. So it has a different mechanism to manage that part. That is why it is available at 24 hours only. Of course, it has security mechanism because it is pointing to the VPC network also. So you can add that RDS into the under your VPC network and can be accessible to only that VPN network. Along with that, you can add another security group. Okay, which IP wanted to give access or which domain wanted to access. Everything can be managed into the security part of the AWS RDS, and it works exactly similar like the how the EC2 things also work. Okay. And next is the manageability. So manageability is like RDS is purely managed by the AWS. We have to just the opt in the service, but they will take care of that part. Like in a previously slide, I mentioned, right, the patching part, okay, batch mechanism, taking the backup, everything they manage it. We don't have to put that headache on our head generally. Okay, how to manage, how to take a backup on that, and okay, how do I restore it? Everything they manage it. Okay, that's one of the core benefit of the using the AWS RDS also. And last one, it is like a cost effective. Okay, so why it's a cost effective? Because this is purely on the pay as you're gone. Okay, so it's like whatever you use you will pay. If you not use, we will not pay on that. So it has a variety of different instance types also, like reserve instances where you can reserve the earlier capacity which you are projecting for a future, right? And based on that you can have a more saving on the cost part also. And similar like a server, it has a mechanism of stop server, stop RDS, start RDS, restart RDS also. Okay, so this is about the benefit of the AWS RDS. I'll move next. Okay, so now we will understand like the one of the best feature of the RDS is like multi-agent. Agent is availability zone. I think everyone is already learn about availability zone in our first session of AWS. Okay, what is the availability zone? What is the regions are there? Okay, so it is like you can see these are the graph. I'm putting in the country graph wise and putting the some zone like generally. Okay, so US West 2 is a region. AP South 1 is a one region, like AP South in the Mumbai region, US 2 is a, I think it's a, not Virginia, it's, no, I forgot the name, a regions one. Okay. So in a regions also, we'll have a different availability zone. Availability zone, like for any kind of the incident management, right? We will have a backup will be there. Okay. So what happened when you enable the multi-agent options, and it is purely optional. It is not mandate to use RDS as a multi-agent because it's always comes with the cost. Okay, if your production environment is not expecting the higher load, okay, and you are not having a more expensive transaction, you can choose a single agent option also, which is very less cost effective. But if you are an expensive transaction is going on it, and if you have a high loads also expecting, and any failure mechanism failure thing, we cannot compromise it. I'll suggest you to go for always a multi-agent only because that give you a relaxed and peaceful sleep on that. So how it works generally? So it is like the availability zone will be available under one region. Okay, it can be near to a state. It can be near to country on that part based on that regions only. Okay, like a zone A and zone B. So what happened? They keep the replica. So whatever in the zone A, right? Similar replica will be there in a B also, and it is exactly similar copy like a synchronization happened the simultaneously only. Okay, so that is about the actually the multi-agents actually thing, but how it works. So you can see this slide here. Okay, there is a called zone A where I'm keeping the one primary database. When I say primary, right? that will be my primary instances where everything happen on that particular instances. And when I enable the multi-agent options, it will be another instance called secondary instance, which will be in a zone B. Okay, and this synchronization happen very frequently. There is no gap in a database. Like if you connect to the both database at the same time or different code, right, you will find the exact data. There is no data gap will be there. Okay, and that is why the multi-agent support for the failure mechanism. So I'll take one of the examples. Suppose you are working on one particular thing and suddenly your primary instance got failed or maybe stopped, or any other incident happen to failure of that. What happen when we have a multi-agent? Multi-agent support that immediately point your DNS to the next available zone. What is the next available zone? Is the secondary one. So it automatically point the DNS routing to the secondary zone. You can see here, it was currently pointing to the zone A, but when it fell down, it will go immediately and connect to the zone secondary zone. So your thing will not be a down. Okay, that is why the failure mechanism is purely the taken care here. So even if anything has failed, it automatically get up immediately basis. That is why the multi-agent work on it. Okay, and because of synchronization, the data availability is higher only there, and similar kind of thing. Yeah, thank you. So what are the failure scenarios generally comes and when the actually primary database can fail on that part? Okay, it like somebody is doing some patching maintenance has been performed on a primary instance. Like suppose AWS is doing some patching mechanism on primary database, and some or maybe somebody our owners is doing it, and due to that mechanism, somehow the primary instance got failed to start or boot. Okay, that also one of the failure instances can be happen. Second will be like if instead of the primary database has been host itself failed, like we are not able to connect to it even a DB or maybe the remote host, that can be also covered as a failure mechanism. Okay. And the third one is like if availability zone of the primary database still fail, like suppose example, a particular in that available zone, some natural calamities happen or something power failures happen, right? That itself it got failed, then again it will go to the next available zone. Fourth one is like when the primary instance was rebooted with a failover. It happens sometimes. Okay. Because we have seen this kind of scenario where sometimes when we reboot it, sometimes it's not able to restart it again. And because of that reason, okay, suppose we are having 24 hours of transaction and our customer is available 24 hours and somebody mistakenly restart our primary instance, what will happen? In that case also, it is treated as a failure. Immediately the DNS pointed to the secondary zone and keep available next zone for the another transaction. So there is no downtime will be, there is no different behavior will face by the customer. And last one is if primary database is a class on the primary database, like suppose if you are changing some instance type or changing some storage on that, any configuration your mechanism you're changing it, right? It actually required a rebooting part. So whenever there is changes in the configuration, we keep always being a rebooting part. That also one of the failure mechanism we treated as that. Okay, so what we have learned on this multi-agent part, right? That's the benefit. It's like it used to help the recycling and business continuity also because it manage the failure mechanism. That is why it help us to business continue on that part. And when multi-agent is configured, the secondary RDS is instance known as a replica. It deploy within the different availability zone within the same region as a primary distance. So that is also like managed by the failure system, and that's it's a single and only purpose of the multi-AZ. Okay, it provide a failure option to the primary RDS instance. Sometime so I was mentioning that DNS pointing out, right? So DNS pointing out sometime it take a 60 to 120 seconds also. Okay, in some of the rare cases it might take a 60 to, but I think they as per AWS documentations also they go up to the 120 seconds the max to max in case of the worst scenario. So make a note of that part. Like whenever the DNS happen, it typically takes the 60 to 120 seconds of that, and length of the time is depend on the size of a database. If database is so high, heavy, right, it may take time to replicate that one. Even database and even whatever transactions or any activities happening through any long queries running on a database may result in the failover part. So So I think before I move to the read replica part, how can we made aware of this situation? Like, because this is managed by AWS, but still, how do we notify this part? So AWS RDS has a defined, like predefined one event that is called RDS hyphen event hyphen 0025, and that is available to have a notification to any of the our services like a Lambda or maybe SMS through that, or we can get the SMS or email whenever there is this event trigger. So in case this is a whatever the 5 case scenario I have mentioned in the failure scenario, apart from that any of the failure mechanism, it always trigger RDS hyphen event hyphen 0025 event, and it can be configured to our communication channel like SMS, SNS, or email also. So we'll get to know, okay, there is something failure happen in the our production environment. Yeah. So now we'll think we have learned now multi-agent. So now another feature of RDS is like a read replica. Okay. So whenever there's a read replica is there, right? So read replica is not exactly similar like a multi-agent. Read replica are not used for resigning or as a secondary instances. Make note of that. So in case of the multi-agent, is always a secondary instance. Like whenever there is a failure happen, secondary become the primary one. Okay, but here in that case is a little bit different part. What happen exactly? They can be used as your application or other service to serve the read-only access to your database via the separate instances. So here the concept is like a write or read. I think nowadays we don't use a master slave concept, but I think many of you have heard about that master slave concept. And due to some terminology, now people are stop using that word, the master slave. We can say now read and write instances only. Okay, so the one instance will be writer always be there. So all the insertion, updation query, any write operation, right? It happens on the writer instance. Any read operations will go to the read instances of the, and read instances will have always be a replica of the database, right? Instances. You can add a 1, 2, 3 instances based on the particular thing, but how many read replica you can have it, that purely depend upon the which type of database you use it. Like MySQL has, I think, 3 or 4 of limitation, whereas the Postgres has a 5 limitation. That's so each database has a different limitation to till when you can have a replica, which count. Look at this diagram here. This is one application server where the read write queries are going to primary database, and here is another read replica where you can have a read only query can go to the read replica. Even that application server's read query can also route to the read replica. It's our choice of where to point it out generally. Okay, and this is purely managed by the AWS. We don't need to be do that work. So the endpoint will be always be same. Okay, so when you're configuring the host entry in your database or code, right, endpoint will be same for the both read and write. AWS manage based on the what kind of operation is coming to that endpoint, whether it's a write operation, whether it's a read operation. It automatically route to particular that instance.
So does that mean it's just a view that we can create replica of, or
Can you read it again?
no? Is that the review that only the view we do the replica of when you say only read only, right? Is it only the view?
No, not only view, anything generally. So view is another part of the SQL things, right? But if you're reading normal data tables also, that so any read operation like select query or any your select functions also, or stored procedure functions also, anything can be done to the read replica.
Got it. It's like just a database without any write permission.
Correct.
Okay. Got you.
So I think so in this case also there are some failure mechanism is available. Okay, how it is available? So even if it not work as a recently or secondary incident, but somehow like example, take example like your primary RDS instance which serve the both read and write. Okay, and due to size of the instances and amount of some intensive traffic, uh, uh, it can redirect that particular traffic to the read replica. So I was someone has asked, right, for the load balancing, how it work. So whenever there is a traffic come more to the writer instance, like primary instance, they automatically route the traffic to read replica based on the categorizations. Okay, and it can become another writer instance also. So reader instance can be become a writer instance in terms of the whenever there is load expecting things are there, and again it can be reverted automatically. So this is no manual activities happen very automatically. Okay, and another instance can be like when your writer instance got failed, or maybe somehow that is was the utilization is 90%. Okay, in that case also automatically replica become a writer replica automatically. That also switchover happen very automatically based on that. That is why here the failure mechanism also can be taken care uh, by using the replica. Okay, sometime what happened due to there is a concept called snapshot taking. When whenever there's scheduled time for taking the backup, so what happens, snapshot always be taken from the right instance, because in a read replica there is a no write operation happen, right? So we'll not have any insertions data. Okay, but due to snapshot taking it, somehow database got stuck. Okay, so that time also the read replica can become a writer instance. Now next is the AWS RDS storage type. So along with the instance type, AWS provides a storage type also, how much storage we can procure for the particular things on that part, right? So there are multiple type of storage RDS provided, like magnetic storage, general purpose storage, that is called SSD1, and provision IOPS also. IOPS is like input output operation per second, and it's little bit the provision IOPS will be little bit a costlier side, but it more higher performance side, where failure mechanism very less frequently we can observe that part. So these storage type are different in terms of the performance characteristic and the pricing part, which help us to like a trailering kind of storage performance and cost to database need. So it's like whatever the database need is there, you choose the particular storage type. If you are expecting a low and less traffic on that part and less transactional also, like no write query will be there. Okay, so we can go for the general purpose or magnetic purpose also. Whereas if you have a higher performance like our EV, okay, we have to choose for the provision IR, because we expect a more load, we expect a more write queries also along with the read. Right? Okay, so based on the need, we can choose the RDS storage type. So MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, Oracle DB, these are the can be created up to the 6 TB of storage. That is the current extent is there. SQL Server support up to 4 TB of storage. Okay, when we're using the provision IFs on general IFs on that. So there are documentations available in AWS on that part. There are comparison matrix also because there are in details part like why particular this provision required this type of the SSD available. Okay, so existing MySQL and Postgres or Oracle database can be scaled to this new database storage limit without any downtime. So whenever you are changing a storage type, there will not be a downtime. But whenever you are changing any instance type, when you say instance type like T1 micro to T2 micro, T2, T1 medium to T3 medium, okay, that is called an instance type. That time the storage, the restart is required. Why? Because that time we are changing our CPU usage, CPU part also, and the core chips also based on this instance type, and that required instance restart. But when you are adding a RDS, right, it is like attaching your extra storage, like a EBS volume or hard disk, that doesn't require the restart part. So that can be possible without the downtime. Okay, so this is actually RDS console. Here you can see the dashboards are there where we can have a see the list of the instance which is created, and here you can if your instance is created, it will show 1, 2, 3 counter like that. And if you go to the database, it will show the list of the database here. Currently, there's no database identifier here, but once we create it, it will show here also. And here is the query editor where we can have some create database query relation also when you click on the create database. But currently, no database is created. It is not available to use the query editor. So I was talking about this part in performance inside one. The performance insight is one of the good feature of the analytics side, and to analyze more query on that part, it is little at the costly side also. So it can enable on demand basis. So whenever you feel that you need to have analyze some data, you can enable. When your work is done, you can disable that part also. So it give more performance insight, like one which query it taking a time, how many time, and really okay, any queries are got stuck. So everything can be analyzed through the performance inside. So it is not come by default. We have to choose based on the our demand. Here's a snapshot. So snapshot is like another kind of word, like taking a backup of that part. So all the backup will be available in a snapshot. Okay, and here you can have automatic backup enables for whichever database you wanted to have it, and there we can put the frequency which we want to do, like hourly, minute wise, daily wise, or monthly. All this can be possible there. Here are the reserve instances. So I was talking about the initial first slide reserve instances, right? Reserve instances, like if you know, okay, these are the expected things are there, so I can reserve some of the instances for a future perspective where I can save some more cost on part. A proxy, I was not having the good idea on that, so I'll move it to the next one. Subnet group, parameter groups, and option groups. So subnet group is like a part of the your VPC group. So if you are a database under VPC, okay, so that will have a subnet group. So we need to have a two subnet group which is available in two different region. Okay, why? Because one is down, it will be have a backup on that. So it is always be selected as a good practices whenever you are creating the RDS instance. Let's have a two subnet group which is available on a two different regions. The subnet group is one of the part of the VPC like networking side. Okay, and the parameter group. So parameter group is there are some by default parameter groups, like some enabling the logging in a MySQL. So I'll open it here and we'll see what are the parameters it can show in. I will clear one test group. It's only So if I click on the parameter group, I can see the list of the configurable parameter which is available to configure and it can, so by default there will be valuable set, but something we need to be disable or enable, right? That can be done there. So there are some of the parameters like logging one, which generally come as a by default true. If you want to false it or maybe some bind log, so there are parameters which you can be configured inside the parameter group. And this parameter group you have to assign to the RDS instances. And once you attach the parameter group, you need to be restart the machines of RDS instances. So each database engine will have each database a parameter group based on the what engine you will use. So you can see here the MySQL will have a Postgres will have a different, MariaDB will have a different, even non-Aurora DB will have a different parameter set. Oracle will have a different parameter set. Based on the your choice, we can select and create a parameter group. So when you don't do that, when you're creating an instance, automatically one default parameter group will be created by the RDS itself. So it automatically get created. If you want to override particular thing, you can do it by creating the custom parameter group and add it attached to the RDS instance. This is the option group for the adding the, so whatever the group parameter group you're going to use it, right? There we can add based on the Okay, so yeah. So here you can select the based on the engine type, you can create the option group. So let's have a test one. Is equal engine 5.8. So this is kind of option group it will create it here. So this will have a options parameter like persistency, permanent port, whatever the extra things we need to be attached here. We can add the here. So I think it's still going on. There is an option called modify option, but the default one. But if you go for this one, you can have a add options and attach to some of the extra parameters like server audit, server event, file path if you want to use it. Okay, we want to change the file path to the other things, we can do it. So these are all the server related configuration parameters. You don't need to be log into the server because IDS doesn't give option to log into the server like we do for EC2 instance or ECS cluster, right? We can log into the SSH or a Windows command, right? This we cannot do it. That is why these provide extra console option to do the extra changes in that part. Yes, so let's see here the create database. There's an option called standard create, easy create. Easy create will have a recommended practices, they will use it. Okay, so based on the our expertise, we will go for it. So we'll just go for standard create first one. Here we can select the engines which we wanted to use it. I'll take example of suppose MySQL. I need to be use a respective engine version here. Now here the template is available here. So I can choose with a free tier. If I'm in a free tier account, I can go for a free tier enabling. If I'm using a particular instance for a dev test, okay, that can be possible. Based on this, the things will change below, like whether auto scaling is required or not required. Okay, that can be changes from the based on the, you can see here, the use default for the high availability and the fast and consistent performance. Similarly, it is like it's simply a development purpose that you can use it to avoid a cost on the development server. We can go for a dev and test in a template type. I'll select here now dev test. Here the options available for the single DB instance like single agent, multi-agent event, or you wanted to have multi-agent cluster. This is something newly has been created like that. So we can have a created cluster inside that have a multiple agent zone also availability. It is a more highly recommended, but still new. But the pricing goes like this. The single will have a lower, multi will have a little higher, multi-agent DB cluster will have a little more higher on that part. Okay. So if I select the multi-agent, I will option have a further option. I'll show it on part. DB concerns. I will name it here some AWS training. Here we can set the username password. Okay, they can select some random password also they will give it to by the recommendation part. Recommended to always be not to use the admin where you can have some respective naming, because admin is very selected naming convention, admin or root, right? So not to be used at admin and root as a part. So here the DB class is defined like standard class, memory optimized class, burstable class. So it depend upon this category, it will show you a list of the instance type to be choose. When you say standard, it will have a lower cost available. When you go for the memory optimized one, it will have a little higher cost available. Based on that, the cost will get. And the bottom, you can see the cost here somewhere. Let me find out. Okay, I think this option is not here to see the cost, but yes, under the RDS calculator, we can find out the cost upfront itself. So there is an option called AWS RDS price calculator. So here you can create upfront estimations on the RDS instance, which we want to configure, and select the particular configuration parameter based on the user usage. And you can see the summary here. So once you select a particular thing, it will show you, okay, save and view the summary. You can see over this many amount of cost is going to for 12 months, and this will be for the monthly cost. Similar way, before it's always related to go for a price calculator before you creating any. It will give a high level idea and upfront cost estimation, which help you to save a cost. So I'll go for a standard one here because it's lower cost. The storage type, which we have seen, a magnetic, provision, and general purpose. A magnetic is maximum up to the 1000 IFS, which is not recommendable. It has a more IFS here. You can define the IFS up to the 256,000. Okay, where you have the option. But if you choose a general purpose, there's no option to choose IFS here. It automatically default it takes. So it has a lower cost. Additional allocate storage, you can add it here. If you want to increase to the next level, we can still go to the limit till we got, I think maximum is 65,531. It is allowed that. Okay. This option is very critical one. Okay, if you enable the storage for auto scaling part, it will add a cost. If you're running on the dev test environment, I'll suggest you not give a cautious part on that checkbox. So whenever you're creating any instances or any feature services in AWS, right, make sure to revisit more things, which is a default checkbox. So option is given. If you don't have a idea on that, it's always select that, go to info page and learn about that. And okay, what is that causing it? Is there any additional cost I have to incur for it? And go. Then based on that, you can enable it. So untick it if it's not required auto scaling, tick it if it's required auto scaling. What is the storage you want to give it? Like when should the auto scaling get triggered? On particular, if you go for 90%, if you go for particular that storage, based on that, it can be enabled here. So these are the connectivity types, okay, which you want to use, whether you have to go for IP version 4 or IP version 4 or 6 or both. Based on that, we can select it. And here I was talking about the VPC. The by default VPC is open to the public network, but if you want to use for your private VPC, you can select from the data, the list of things. And subnet, based on that, we can choose for the subnet. And here's the option called default subnet. And if you are going to use a public access, like in a code here, you have to select this the EC2 instances. You clearly say that if you want to be access this RDS instance endpoint in EC2 environment, right, you have to select on the public access. Even if you have a VPC, still you want to clear the public access, because inside a VPC, you will have a security on that part. Here, the VPC group can be selected here, or you can create a new VPC group based on that. Other additional groups are there, like what is the by default port we have. MySQL engine runs on the 3306, whether the other engine run on different port on that. You can change that port also. So what database authentication mechanism you have to give it, either through username password or through the IAM you have to do it, or through the Kerberos authentication do it, we can enable here. Here we can have an initial database name. So when you're creating the database instance, right, what will be my first database name should be there, that can be covered here. Another default checkbox. If you enable this backup, it will be keep continue taking the backup. Here you can mention the backup retention period. Okay, how long the backup you have to keep it there, and what frequency you have to keep it. So it's like choose a window for the backup, and start time, end time you can put in here generally. I'll disable the backup here. Any encryption you want to enable for the KMS part, it will where you can disable this part if it's not required here. And another default one, turn on the performance insight. So if you don't want the performance insight by initially, you can just disable it. If you enable it, it has an option called 7-day period retention period, because it has to store some of the existing log. So they will have a retention period on that. Then log export, which log export you have to enable, whether audit log, error log. So it will be available in a CloudWatch also. All this log, you can click on the person part, and that log can be available under the CloudWatch log. Okay, and this is the maintenance window. So any version upgrade they are doing it or anything, right? You can choose any maintenance window. Like, okay, this day you can go for upgradation, like Sunday if you have downtime or offload time, right? That you can select it. If you no preference, then AWS will ask you through the mail and you have to enable that thing. And I was talking about this part. So here, while doing it, before you creating a database, right, I'll get idea on the upfront cost. Okay, how much cost I'm going to incur. Like once I go on that part and I'm agree that, okay, this is the cost I'm going to use it, I can click on the create database here. And as I mentioned here, you can go to the calculator part and see the upfront part. So that's about this session. So
Thank you for watching session. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to channel.